Welcome to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball. You never know what special guest may stop on by any given day. Now here's the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Jones.
So on the show today, the World Cup's in 2 years, right?
Maybe. I think it is.
Yeah,
2026. Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
U.S. better find a gear. Holy mackerel. Every time you turn around. Is there a team that the United States has ever put out that leads the league in disappointment?
Ugh.
I mean, over and over again. I mean, and here's the issue. Okay? It's not as if, for example, you're out there and you've lost to Germany or you've lost to Brazil
Right.
or you've lost to Italy or Spain or whatever, okay? It's not as if you're a team from the United States that lost to Russia, a team from the United States that maybe lost to China, something, okay, in any sport, Over and over again. And they'll tell you this is the most talented U.S. men's soccer team ever. Pulisic is obviously a gem.
Mm-hmm.
But they're losing to Panama. Okay?
Yeah,
and again, I'm not this has nothing to do with the fact Panama in terms of the quality of their soccer program.
Mm-hmm.
Losing to Uruguay, we know Uruguay has a quality soccer program, but this is a country of 335 million people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
We
absolutely
can't
right.
find 20?
Yeah, apparently not.
We
Yeah,
can't
I agree.
find 20 that are better than their 20?
Yeah,
That's what
absolutely right.
that's bizarro world.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think, to me, and that's exactly how to put it, completely. And you're not knocking the countries they lose to,
No,
but
they-
you're
they
looking
have
at population size.
Right.
And you're thinking, man, it's like, it's equivalent to, and this isn't the best example, but high school football, a 6A team losing to a single A team
Right.
repeatedly. It shouldn't happen.
Over and over.
And that's absolutely
over and
where-
over again
yeah.
they're losing, okay?
Yeah.
Trinidad and Tobago gives them a run
Yeah.
for their money.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the part that is bizarre about this. And I know that in those countries, it is the sport. I've got that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is also a country of 335 million. Out of the 335 million, we can't find 20 to beat their 20? Really?
Yep.
I
And
mean, come on.
yeah, and you go back to the previous point, the interest level.
If they lose to Mexico or Brazil, I got it.
No, there's
Okay?
no doubt.
Okay? I got
Yeah.
it. This,
You look at their run in 1994. I think that was, lost to Brazil there 1-0. I thought that was a great effort.
They beat Colombia on an own goal.
Yeah, they did. They did.
Right. And
Andres
that guy-
Escobar, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
yeah,
that
tragedy.
guy lasted
yeah.
a month.
Absolute tragedy. Yeah.
But
But yeah, that's
but that 1994 is 30 years ago.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a team that is struggling to qualify for the one.
Exactly.
That's where you're looking at it, and
the
it's
U.S.
just-
women,
it shouldn't
to their
happen.
credit, the U.S. women got ahead of the curve. They were ahead of
Yeah,
everybody else.
absolutely.
Right? And the popularity, when they sit there and they say we should have equal money, well, in this country, you're darn right they should.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're the ones that draw the ratings.
Draw
They
the ratings.
win.
Absolutely. And
They're more popular.
yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And, the argument is going to be, and absolutely, yes, when you look at it, Brazil, England even, other sports, soccer, the interest, obviously that is the sport of sports.
Yep.
And the argument's going to be interest level isn't there in the U.S.
Yep.
I can make that argument
Yep.
3 years and 10 months out of the time. I'm not making that argument in the World Cup because the interest level is clearly there when the World Cup comes around.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. So if the United States could field a team, the interest is going to be there, the ratings are going to be there, and people are going to watch. It is different than those other 3 years, 10 months.
What was it? I think it was in Brazil, right?
Yeah.
The U.S. won, I
When the
think,
U.S. won, yeah.
Right? They won, and then they lost a heartbreaker to Portugal, I believe.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, people were watching,
Yeah,
and it was
absolutely.
exciting.
Absolutely, and they will. And then that's especially when the World Cup is domestically in the United States.
I mean, this is a chance to put men's soccer and advance it further than it ever has. Instead of advancing it by inches, they can maybe advance it by yards if they can,
or miles even.
if they can have a good showing on their home turf. Get to the knockout round. Okay. But like results like this, and I didn't watch it. I'm not going to pretend I watched it because I didn't. I know what the result is. I read about it this morning. I'm thinking, and the problem is you saw it coming. Kyle and I talked about it last week that that they were probably not going to beat Uruguay. Right? The Panama thing, I mean, there's a lot of mystifying stuff with them. I don't get it. I mean, they're going to change managers. I mean, that's they're going to start with that. But somehow, some way, you got to find people to put around Pulisic and a couple of other guys that are just better, that make a better team. And it's the United States. Out of 335 million, you got to be able to find 20 that are high quality, can play the game and win for you. I don't know. All right, we talk a lot of money. We'll do that today. Who are the number one overall revenue producers last year? Ohio State was number one, Texas A&M 2, Texas 3, Michigan 4, Georgia 5, Nebraska 6, Penn State 7 in terms of athletic revenue generated. Dartmouth men's basketball did not make the list. Tennessee 8, LSU 9, Alabama 10. No, they didn't just miss.
They just missed it? I thought they were pretty close.
No, even Rutgers generated more. They were 40th. But that's the athletic generation part of it. Now, those are all public schools, the ones that have to report. It doesn't include private schools. So Notre Dame isn't in there.
Right.
USC's not in there, among others. So they don't have to report. No. That's based on the federal government numbers. And I talk about that all the time. Equity in athletics, you want to go to and actually find the numbers, right? Instead of it doesn't take long to go if there's something you want to look up, and then go from there. So get this about SMU. So yesterday was the day that SMU went in to the ACC. They are not taking any television money, all right? So we'll do this on our own. You want to know how much money SMU has raised since the announcement of the ACC? $156 million. That's how much money they have raised since the ACC announcement. That's amazing. We already know that they have a deep-pocketed alumni group and friends of the program. It's deep-pocketed. I don't know if you've ever been to the SMU campus. It's gorgeous.
Right.
It's just fabulous. But that is an amazing number. And again, they're not going to take any money from the ACC. And then they go out and they raise $156 million. Now you know why they didn't feel like they needed to take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Cal and Stanford are only going to get $11 million out of this. There's going to be, as long as Florida State is out there with its lawsuit, and of course Clemson's had its rumblings and so forth, about what's going to happen with them. We'll see. Nobody knows. I mean, literally nobody knows. There are people that are making, you can't even make educated guesses as to what's going to happen. But I will start with this. When I was in Jacksonville speaking, your name came up. It wasn't.
I'll tell you, those Jaguars. Might have been Daytona. I think it might have been.
Well, I did the Daytona speech too. Well, this came up in both speeches because when you're speaking, when you're speaking in Florida, by the way,
absolutely, you have
right. You're going to bring up Florida State,
sure,
which is which I understood. And somebody asked me about going to 20. Now, I've told this story on this podcast before, but I'll retell it here just as a refresher. And I said, I looked over and I said, I completely understand and respect the question. I said, I want to see how 18 works first.
I'm actually surprised they didn't wait to see how 16 worked first and got 18 in there. But it was the right move because of the revenue obviously is going to be there. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason they moved when they moved was by now having 4 on the West Coast. Believe it or not, it does some things that makes scheduling easier for them. It's more palatable for the West Coast teams in every sport to at least have road trips that they're used to.
That's true. Yeah.
So absolutely. I think that's right. Now, they did not go out, and with all due respect to fine institutions, Oregon State and Washington State are fine institutions. They didn't add Oregon State and Washington State. They added Oregon and Washington.
Yeah.
And they bring cachet
absolutely
on the football field, basketball court, and they bring TV ratings. They're among 2 of the 18 that make up 50% of the TV ratings. They're 2 of them.
Yeah.
So they did bring them in, but they also brought them in at the half rate.
Yeah.
And that's the part I keep talking about. I don't think, first of all, we have not seen any conference until now go past 16.
No.
And I'm not talking about 15 in the ACC with Notre Dame. I'm not talking about that, okay? That's a basketball thing.
Yeah.
All right. So we haven't seen that. The WAC was at 16, and Carl Benson, I think, was the commissioner of the WAC. And they finally split into the Mountain West and the WAC. 16 was hard to manage. Now it's 2024, and I think they've got an idea of how to manage this, but that's the entire key to this. Everybody in the Big Ten, with all the planning they've done, still doesn't know in practical application how it works.
That's going to work. Exactly.
It's one thing to plan for it, which I give the Big Ten a lot of credit. I think that they have done an excellent job of planning. I think they've thought a lot out. I mean, just something as simple as football. You have 14 Eastern and Central time zone teams that have to go to the West Coast. Okay. Of those 14, 8 have a bye week the next week. Penn State's one of them. They have a bye week before they go back out to Wisconsin. The other 6 have home games the next week. So, I mean, it's that kind of thought process that gives you a better chance of seeing if this succeeds. So they're doing that. And I've looked at the soccer schedules and so forth and the volleyball schedules. Yeah. And it looks like there's some thought that's gone into that. But you don't know until you get to the practical application part of it, where you sit back after a year and go, okay, that works. Instead of jumping the gun and saying, we got to go to 20, go to 20. You don't even know how 18 works yet.
Yeah.
Right? It takes time and adjustment to see how 18 works. And let's start with this. Do you have the right 18? And you do. The Big Ten has the right 18, and the SEC has the right 16. And the SEC is now trying to go to 16. They got to make sure they see how that works. Everybody has to see how it works first, right? And there will be issues that they'll have to tweak the model in order to take care of it. And everybody, of course, they get excited about expansion with new schools coming in and so forth. I understand.
There's no doubt.
Right? So I understand the excitement about movement of chess pieces and so forth. But there's a management part of this that nobody ever talks about. You know, and nobody ever talks about the fact that Washington and Oregon are in this conference on half.
On half, yeah. You're sharing, exactly.
Right?
The piece of the pie is the
I never
biggest
hear
thing.
anybody talk about that. You've got to use some semblance of common sense.
Yeah, and that's why
Florida State, we're coming in as a full. No, guess what? I got Oregon and Washington over
coming
here.
in as a half.
Okay?
Yeah.
So now let's, to me, the key is still 29, 28, 29, right around there. That's when you start negotiating the next TV contract in the Big Ten. The SEC is not doing it for a couple of years after that.
Right.
I mean, there's a couple year gap. The SEC, I think, runs through 33, 34, right? Something like that. Right? So they won't start negotiating their next one until maybe 32, 31, 32 around there. Big Ten goes to 29, 30. So right around 27, 28, right around there, they'll start negotiating the next TV contract. That's the next time you think about expansion.
Right. And I fully understand the fans' perspective of it, asking about it, just because, it's no different than anything else where something new comes in. The next question is, what's next? And that's exactly, I think, from the fans' perspective where they're looking at it. But yeah, from a business model, you have to see, number one, does it work? But the biggest point, number two, Oregon and Washington only getting half this year. And once they do generate into that full portion of it, does that next person come in make sense to where that full portion is going to be about the same for everybody? You're not going to take away from what these schools are bringing in. And I think there are schools, a couple of years from now, Florida State keeps the consistency they're keeping right now. They keep that accreditation.
Yeah.
If they can get that, I think they are absolutely in the conversation for one of those teams. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but
not
now. No, not now at all. Not now at all for them. Not now at all for Clemson. The only team where you jump at it, where it doesn't matter the year, is Notre Dame.
Right.
And absolutely, if they become available, you make it work.
And they're not available
and they're
for
not.
a while.
They're not. No, they're under contract with NBC for years.
Signed their new NBC contract.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's the point. If they become available at any point, suddenly, whoa, you can make it work. But other than that, no, you got to see how everything works out first with what you're doing.
This whole thing has not made any sense.
No.
I understand on the Florida State side of it. Like they're looking around and they know by the month they're falling further behind.
They're falling further behind, and they're getting more and more frustrated with the ACC. I think they're very clear as day.
So I got it.
Yeah.
But again, you signed the grant of rights twice, not once, but twice.
Sure.
Okay? You made the decision, and that's
and they don't have the deep pockets that Texas and Oklahoma has, and Texas and Oklahoma had to wait. So I think there's no question that
there's so much that's gone into this. Like you point out, Texas and Oklahoma. Okay, they got invited 3 years ago. They accepted the invitation 3 years ago. They're finally
and their
playing
pockets are deeper than
now.
Florida State's. A lot deeper than Florida State's.
And they paid $50 million each to get out of the last year.
Not a doubt. Yep.
All right. So if you're paying $50 million each to get out of the last year, how much do you have to pay to get out of 10 years?
10 years. Exactly.
I mean, come on. I mean, there's a lot of things that just don't add up with all this. And I sit there and I see this stuff and I read it and it's any day now, any minute, anyway. Just knock it off.
Yeah, and again, from a fan's perspective, it's understandable. From everything else, no, it's not understandable.
You got to get into Florida. Okay, fine. You got to get into Florida. All right.
Yeah. And that's Florida saying that is for the most part. Usually, that's Florida saying, "Hey, bring it."
But I've got 18 schools here that's never been tried before.
No.
This college sports has never been tried before. why don't we see how it works first? And then figure out what to do after that.
That includes, as you said, the scheduling.
It includes everything.
The structure is set pretty well right now. I don't think there's any question about it. That doesn't mean it's going to work. I could build something that looks great. It might fall over 2 seconds later. You never know.
They may have to make a major adjustment somewhere.
Yeah.
Or they may have to just make a series of tweaks, but they'll need to figure out what those tweaks are to make it better.
To make it work. Absolutely.
Right? In all likelihood, it's tweaks, not major.
Right. Yeah, I think the structure they have right in place is almost perfect right now. That doesn't mean it's going to be that.
I think because when you sit down to do something like this, this is something I talk about all the time, right? You have to figure out in your head as many as possible of unintended consequences. Because those are the ones you sit back, because that's where you need to tweak.
Yeah, that's where, absolutely.
You'll sit there and go, I thought of 10 things. All right? Right? We think we've got everything.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, oh, geez. Suddenly 11 and 12 come up, and you're like, well, I didn't think of that one. Well, that never came up in our thought because it's just something crazy
exactly
comes up that you didn't think of.
There's always stuff you don't think of.
So
when you open a business, there's stuff you don't think of right away.
You've never tried.
Exactly. You never tried
it. First of all, where's the model? We're going to look at the WAC conference model from years ago?
No.
What, we're going to look at that? No, the WAC conference hasn't been around forever. They're the last ones to get to 16. Okay? Well, now you've got 18. Nobody's tried 18. Now, the Big East, if you remember, got to what, 17?
17, yeah.
Right? And guess what? It imploded. Now, they also had the issue of they've got football schools, they've got basketball schools, and they were fighting all the time. And it finally just all broke apart. It was too much, too big, and they were trying to get bigger, if you remember. Let's invite San Diego State. Okay. They were talking to Boise. Okay. Right? Well, what makes them in the Big East? Well, I guess because they're further east than Hawaii. SMU was, okay. So all those things fell apart. You know what the breaking point was? When they invited East Carolina and Tulane. That was the breaking point for the Catholic schools. That was it. The basketball-only schools. When they invited Tulane and East Carolina because of the football part of it, you know. And they're like, we're not doing this anymore. And that was it. They broke it apart. That was the breaking point. But remember, they invited San Diego State. They invited Boise State. They invited SMU. I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? And they couldn't manage 17. Now, they were trying to manage half of them, thereabouts, being only basketball schools versus the other ones that had football and basketball. And that's an impossible deal to manage. Mike Tranghese was forever trying to plug up holes, right, and keep people together. When it was just a basketball conference, Dave Gavitt had the ability to walk in the room, egos, and was the magnet that got everybody to naturally gravitate toward and solve problems. But you're at that point, you only had 8 schools. Okay? And they were only playing basketball. Then, of course, the football part started up, and this is where when Joe went and met with Dave at Bradley International Airport in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, right, about Penn State possibly getting in. Well, the vote came up, and it was, let's see, St. John's, Seton Hall, Villanova, Georgetown voted against it. Let's see, Seton Hall, St. John's, Villanova, Georgetown. Is there anybody else? Voted against it. And that was enough to keep them out. Because you needed X amount to come in. And Mike Tranghese in that 30 for 30 had the famous quote where he said to Dave Gavitt, he says, Do you feel like this ended up being a mistake? Is this vote going to come back to haunt us? And it did. Now, it took a while because then Penn State went to the Big Ten and everybody went, uh-oh, what are we going to do? And that's when they formed the Big East Football Conference. Well, now that's when, okay, they're playing football. That's fine. Miami was good in it. Virginia Tech was fine in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, Pitt was going along doing its deal. West Virginia.
West Virginia was okay,
but eventually Miami kept making noises about leaving. They put in the Miami rule where if you win the Big East and you get the major bowl bid, you get a $4 million bonus.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. They put the, quote, Miami rule in. The odd thing is that now Miami's gone to the ACC and they've never won an ACC football championship.
No, and that's the ironic part of it.
They never have.
No,
but again, that comes down. Again, this is a little different model.
Sure.
Because you've got schools just playing basketball and schools playing football and basketball. So you're trying to manage it. Right? Remember going back to the Big East basketball tournament, UConn, when they won 5 in 5 days with Kemba Walker, they were, what, an 11 seed?
Yeah, they were late seed, yeah.
All right. So, and then eventually won the national championship. But that is, you're trying to manage that. Now let's get to this. Nobody has attempted to manage an 18-school all-sports conference where everybody's involved in everything.
Yeah.
That's because the Big East was a league. Well, what's the difference between a league and a conference? Well, in a conference, you play everybody in everything. In a league, it's selective.
Selective. Yep.
All right. So now here's the Big Ten Conference, 18 schools. And you got people out there saying, got to go to 20. Why? I'm over here like, excuse me, can we see how this works first? You got to manage this thing. There's got to be reasonable expectations about what management happens to be, about making it work. And you've got schools in that are not getting full shares. Well, excuse me, those two schools down south aren't going in for halvesies. They want full shares. They think they're going to get a full share. Guess
Not
what?
happening.
They're going to get a full share before you do.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're already a part of the membership group. Now, starting August 2nd.
Yeah.
But they're already part of the membership group. They were vetted. They're AAU schools, both. Florida State is not. They're trying to get there.
Not. No, and I think you've got to get there.
But they're not there yet.
No.
Is it the be-all, end-all? Oh, no.
No, but I think it's, I think to get into the Big Ten, I think it's a big part of it.
But it is a discussion point that comes up in the room. How about that?
Yeah.
We'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you can't sit there and say that based on this conference's model, this is what we came up with. There isn't one. I mean, even the SEC going to 16, there aren't 16 models out there. Now, do I think 16 is easier to manage than 18? Yeah, because of the brackets of 4 that you can put together as to how you do things. Sure, that's why those kind of numbers work. But who's tried 18? And you have people say, go to 20, 24. What are you doing? Can we see how something else works first? Because there are going to be bugs in the system that have to be worked out. There are going to be unintended consequences nobody thought of, right? That in all likelihood are correctable. But you got to see how it works first. And you can't just see it in 1 year. Okay, 1 year, we got it made. It needs a couple of years, right? And now it's, you can sit there and beg all you want about places you want to go and so forth. The world is not desperate for you.
Right.
They're not beating your door down. I mean, people act as if they've been making phone calls and they've got the. You want to know what? Nobody knows.
No.
Nobody knows if Florida State has contacted any conferences. If a conference contacts Florida State, that's called tampering.
Uh-huh.
They're already a part of it. If anybody calls them, it's called tampering.
Sure.
Now, they may reach out, like, okay, well, it's like, send us some material. We'll take a look at it. But if I'm sitting in Birmingham or I'm sitting in, suburban Chicago out in Rosemont, I'm trying to get this thing to work.
Yeah. What you've got to do. Right? You've got to see if it does.
Then once I am comfortable that I can make this work, now I may take a look at something else that could enhance the pie for everybody. But you just can't just step in, hey, we want an equal share. Guess what? The money is not there right now. No. The money's not there. The money wasn't there for Oregon and Washington.
They're not getting a full share.
Tony went and talked to them, Tony Petitti. Tony went and talked to them about, to Fox about, hey, help us out here. Okay. And so it worked out to where they got them in. But now you have to manage it. And I've talked about the management part of this the entire time. And for each school out there, each school has to manage this. Right? You're running Penn State. Okay. So in the management of a season, in a season where you've got to go to Eugene and Seattle, how do we make the trip? What are the logistics of the trip? How do we make it work? For any sport. Now, Penn State in football and basketball doesn't have to go to Seattle and Eugene right out of the gate. They have to go to Seattle in 2026 and Eugene in 27. Okay. Yep. But basketball has to go out there, men's and women's basketball, both next year. Okay. Well, let's see, how does it work? So do you go out to Eugene? Where do you stay? Okay, next, just say it goes Oregon first, Washington second, whatever. Do you bus up I-5 from Eugene to Seattle, or do you fly to Seattle? Like, these are all questions that you have to have answered as to how you do it. What hotels do you stay in? Where do the Pac-12 teams stay? Okay, where do you get food around there? To make sure. What about a practice gym? Because you're going to need a practice gym when you have multiple days. Where do you get a practice? For example, do you go and practice at the Knight Center the next day after playing the game? Or do you find a gym in Seattle, in the Seattle area, to go have practice? You're going to have to practice. Right? You're not playing them on back-to-back nights. I mean, these are all questions. And if you flip it, okay, I go to Seattle first, and then I go to Eugene. Okay, well, fine. Now, where do I practice? Do I practice in Portland? Do I practice in Corvallis? Do I practice in Eugene? Is there, a high school I can go to and use in the Eugene area? These are all things you have to work out because you haven't been there before. All right? And everybody acts like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, what? Okay, I can't give you an answer for it. I've never made the trip. Never made the trip. Right? When I went through the Atlantic 10, the first season of the Atlantic 10, same thing. Figure out how do the logistics work? How do you get certain places? All right. There's certain places that were automatic. You knew how Temple and Rutgers worked in the Atlantic 10. You knew how West Virginia worked.
Absolutely.
But not UMass, not Rhode Island, St. Bonaventure, GW. Right. Didn't know how it worked. Okay? Duquesne to a point, yeah, because it's Pittsburgh. You understood that. But the other ones, no idea. Big Ten, okay. Penn State had been to Ohio State. Is there anybody else they've been to in the Atlantic 10 where they played at a Big Ten school? And they played in the tournament in Indiana, but that was like the coaching staff wasn't a part of that. That was back when Dick Harder was the coach. I don't think there's any place they had been. Well, they played at Illinois. This is after it was announced they're going to the Big Ten. They had a home and away with Illinois when Deion Thomas played. Penn State won both games. In fact, out at Illinois, when they went out for the rematch, Penn State fell behind 16-0. And the fans started chanting, "Welcome to the Big Ten, welcome to the Big Ten." Penn State came back, won the game. Whoops. So those are the only two places they had been, were Ohio State and Illinois, as a coaching staff, a planning staff, and so forth. Okay. So there was at least some level of familiarity as to how to do those two places. There's no other place they'd been to. Minnesota? Wisconsin? Right? Purdue?
No. Northwest?
No. Even Michigan?
Yeah, never played.
Right? Yeah, you sit there like it's all new. And so it's going to be the same thing with these four schools. It's all new for everybody. What do you think? Rutgers is out there playing USC in football? Ever? In the Coliseum? Have any of the Rutgers players been to the West Coast? But I'm saying all these little things. So the conference has to do its thing. The individual schools have to do this. Now you want to throw somebody else in there? And again, this goes to money. Here's the pie. Okay. Hey, I add somebody.
That pie shrinks.
Suddenly my slice does this. It's got to be somebody that makes the slice do that, which then makes the pie like that. Well, you can't do that until 29 or 30. You can't. Because that's when the TV contracts are up. You can't keep going to Fox and saying, give us more money, when they asked for the money the last time, they did it on half shares. Okay. I mean, they have only X amount of money. They didn't bid for the NBA. They didn't.
No.
And there's certain things that happen along the way. For example, NBC lost the NHL. Well, they took that money and they rolled it into the Big Ten.
Okay, sure.
Right? And that's what happens with these contracts. I mean, TNT's on the verge of losing the NBA. They've just rolled in two new contracts, one for the Big East and 2 games of the college football playoff. Okay, that's how these businesses operate. They're not money trees. And I think everyone just senses, okay, Florida State and Clemson, here's the money. The networks are going, hey, I already have a contract with you. I already have a contract. I can't, there's only so much they can pay.
Absolutely.
Everybody acts like it pay whatever, like it's some infinite number. And I realize the squeeze is going to be on at Florida State and Clemson because this 22% of revenue is a big issue.
And the other part of it is the TV contracts, just how much they've climbed. Yeah, they're not going to. Yeah, these TV networks, as you said, you're not going to throw out more money because you've thrown out more money than you expected you were going to begin with at this point. Where with how high you were asked the Big Ten a decade ago what this TV deal was going to be, it would not be the number it is right now.
Well, the numbers changed from April.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 years ago to August. Because they added in USC and UCLA.
Absolutely.
Right. So you're supposed to pay up to $22 million or 22%. Of your revenue. Okay. So the question is, with Florida State is not in the top 10 in revenue.
No.
So let's talk about them for a moment. Clemson is outside the top 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they're both not astronomically out of the top 10. They're not far
Florida
off.
State's 18.
Yeah.
Florida State's 18. 169 million in revenue. Clemson is 195. Yeah. Okay. So let's take 195 times 0.22. Okay. So 195 million. All right. So they'd have to pay the 22 million. Right. As for Florida State, same thing, but they got to come up with it.
Yeah.
But they have right now 37 million less in revenue than Penn State. Uh-oh. They have 37 million less. It's not even just 37 million less. Florida State has, let's see, this is why they're panicked. They have 37 million less than Penn State. They have 110 million less than Ohio State. They have 60 million less than Michigan. And then they each are like 37 and 38 million behind Penn State and Nebraska. I have to ask where Nebraska is spending their money. I mean, they've got Wisconsin ahead of them. Michigan State's ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the issue. And that's why they're just ahead of Iowa. This is on revenue. And this doesn't include private schools. But that's where they are. And, if you're wondering about UCLA is 49th, 105.4 million in revenue. And part of that is what's been happening with their football situation. I mean, you look at the Rose Bowl. Yeah, they play USC and LSU. That's an awesome crowd. They're playing South Alabama.
Yeah.
It's friends and family, and even some of the friends decide not to go that day. You're wondering about Oregon and Washington. Washington's 22 at 151. Oregon is 23 at 150, and Minnesota is 24, followed by Illinois. Indiana's 27. Anybody else here? Rutgers is 40, Purdue's 41, Maryland's 44. Then UCLA's 49. And again, Northwestern wouldn't be in here because they're a private school. And USC wouldn't be in here, they're a private school. So you don't know what the USC numbers are. But those are private schools. And that's all from the Equity and Athletics group. But that's what strikes me about the expansion talk. I don't understand why the lack of common sense. Well, maybe a part of me does, because I sense there isn't a lot of it these days.
A lot of times also from a fan's perspective, a fan looking at it, they see the expansion, they're going to say, "Oh, what's next?" And that's instinct. That's understandable. Right. But yeah, from the everybody else perspective is where you start to look at it and say, "Okay, you're not making sense."
So you're the NBA and you're the NBA Major League Baseball. Okay. Right, you have 30 teams each. Right? I already have a model in the NHL, and albeit it's a football model,
right?
But I have two models out there that happen to be 32.
Yeah.
That I can draw from and look at.
Mm-hmm.
What model do you draw and look at for 18 in college sports? None.
No.
Hey, you're the one that's setting the standard. You're the one that's making up the rules on the fly. Okay? And you have people out there go to 20. Like, hey, just try. Okay? Because they had 16 worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they had it worked out.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden the 18th thing came up. Okay. What's wrong with going forward with 18? Why do you need 20? Who cares? Right? I sit down to negotiate a new TV contract, and my partners are happy.
Yeah.
Fine.
And the way you've structured it, too, where everybody's playing each other in 4 years. You're going home and away.
See, that's the part.
Yeah. That's the other part.
With 16, they had it done. When they added in 18, I give them credit. They had to stretch it out over 5 years to do it. But everybody's playing everybody in the conference home and away in a 5-year span. That's the way a conference should work. I've said that forever.
Absolutely.
Okay? And I was talking with Phil Steele yesterday. He asked me how you were doing. I said, do you care? He goes, no, not really. It's just boring.
Yeah.
Right. He's actually more concerned about Patches the dog.
Oh,
he says,
he should be.
He says, is Patches okay? I said, it's cruel world. And I brought up to Phil about what Iowa did, the protecting of 3.
Sure.
I said, Phil, because he was talking about how he thinks Iowa can have a really good year, and a lot of it's based on he likes their defense a lot. He thinks there's a lot of all conference performers on the defense, and he thinks the offense is going to be better.
Progress. There's no question.
Right, that the offensive line and so forth. So that's what he was talking about. But I made a point to him. I said, here's the other part moving forward, Phil. Remember, 25% of their total schedule and 1/3 of their conference schedule every year, because of the protected rivalries, they're the only ones that went with 3. They protected Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska. Said they're going to play them every single year. I said that X's out as many Penn State, Michigan, Ohio States, USC's, and Oregon's as possible because they only have 6 conference openings. Yep. And he started chuckling. He says, you know what? He says, I didn't think of that.
Right? Yeah, I think they thought of something else, too, being where, obviously the divisions are gone in the Big Ten. And now the Big Ten West, where you were at the top when you're Iowa and you're Wisconsin, Minnesota even competing. Now you're going to be 7th or 8th in the Big Ten. It's going to be a big difference.
Well, that's a big problem.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
John Canzano from Portland, who writes and has his own podcast, with John Wilner, I guess officiated at a wedding. And he was sitting he said, it's the only one I'm ever going to do, but he officiated it. He says, I don't even know if they're legally married. Right. And he said some Big Ten fans had come in from Minnesota and maybe a couple from Iowa. And this is a question I asked my Big Ten brethren as broadcasters. I said, is 7th or 8th good?
Yeah.
In football. Football. Is 7th or 8th good?
Right.
They all looked at me and went, ew. I said, well, if you're coming off an year and you move up to 7th or 8th, yeah.
Yeah. You're Northwestern, you're thrilled with it.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, you're Iowa, Wisconsin.
You're no longer like, oh, it's a tough year. I finished 4th in my division.
Yeah.
But now you could finish 12th.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody's going to finish 18th.
Yeah. Yeah, from an Iowa perspective especially. You're looking at last year where your offense was abysmal. There's no sugarcoating it. And the changes were shown to prove that. Where you're still looking at it, though. You had a chance to win the Big Ten. You're playing Michigan in the Big Ten championship. You're not in that spot now.
No.
It's a big difference.
And the other element that you look at, is in basketball at least, if I finish 7th or 8th, the difference is I can get to the NCAA tournament. A 7th or 8th place team in the Big Ten can get to the NCAA. A 7th or 8th place team in football has no shot at the college football
but you're not
playoff. You're going to go to a bowl game, but you're not. You have no shot at even the 16-team playoff. You would have no shot at 7th or 8th. At least in basketball, you finish 7th or 8th, you can get to the NCAAs.
Yep.
And that's the big difference.
Absolutely.
Right. But, the ACC media days are coming up.
And that will be questions that are going to be asked. There's no doubt.
And Florida State and Clemson will draw questions. Every time you turn around, somebody is out there saying, well, it's going to happen now. Oh, yeah, hey, sit back. There's going to be and then Florida State makes a big announcement. We're going to have a big announcement coming up. This is it. It's the baseball coach. Okay. Yeah, right. Oh, really? Okay. That's great. Yeah. Thanks for the inside information. Well done. Yeah. I've got connections. You do? I actually know people who have connections.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's going on.
Nope.
And that's because they're good people who are honest. He says nobody knows.
Nope.
Right? That's the whole key about this. Nobody knows. I have it. No, you really don't.
Nope.
Nobody knows.
I agree.
Yeah. Kind of like the motto of your shows. Nobody knows.
That's right.
I know we'll be on tomorrow, but you got a long day coming up on the 4th of July. You've got to come in and,
It's shortened a little bit now, but it's still a long one.
But it starts at 9:45 at night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Unfortunately, you're not a person that does his best work between 10 a.m. and 4.
That's right.
I'm sorry, that was an easy, cheap joke.